college football may be a month and a half away, but if you're anything like me, it's well past time that we start getting ready for this upcoming 2022 season. This first series I'm going to do, I'm going to have tons of content throughout the season, mostly from a sports betting perspective. If you didn't know, my name is Michael Fordham. You can follow me on Twitter at Fordham Betting. I handicap college football, college basketball, and Major League Baseball. Last year in the college football season, hit at a 55% clip and netted over 27 units. But with that being said, we are still a month and a half away, like I said. So I thought something fun to get us started. I'm going to look at the quarterbacks from all of the Power 5 conferences and give you my power rankings. I'm going to do it through a tier list. We're going to have 6 categories. Heisman, which is obviously guys who I think are going to have a shot to end up in New York this year. We got very good, above average, average, liability, and unknown. As far as the unknown guys that, I just think the verdict is out on them. They played a very limited amount of snaps. I was initially also just going to have that very good go, just down to average. But, I did feel a need to add that above average category. I do think there's some guys that fit that mold. With that being said, I'll say one thing. These rankings are based on, obviously my opinion. But my opinion is certainly backed by, last year's stats, maybe even 2020, 2019 stats. Also just how I see them fitting within their offense and what they're being asked to do. So, I'm sure this is going to ruffle some feathers. I'll say this right away. If you're a Clemson fan, you're not going to like what I have to say. Hear what I have to say. If you have any disagreements, feel free to leave any of that in the comments. I'm more than happy to debate y'all. With that being said, we're going to just jump right into it. 2022 ACC quarterback rankings. Let's get started.
All right, so we're going to get it started here with Jordan Travis, Florida State. I really like Jordan Travis. I would put him in this above average category. Not the best passer ever. Was over 8 yards per attempt, and completion percentage is well above 60%. You can certainly win with that, but I think what takes Travis to the next level is his ability as a runner. Over 500 yards on the ground each of the past 2 seasons. I also think he's proven to be extremely valuable to Florida State. He was 5-2 as the starting quarterback last year. They went 0-5 without him. They were terrible with McKenzie Milton. They need his mobility and his ability as a dual threat quarterback. I do think you can make an argument that he's in this average category. Personally, just kind of projecting. I think with a full season staying healthy, he can be a big asset to Florida State and kind of take them to that 8, possibly 9 win range. I certainly think that the Noles can win with Jordan Travis. I think he's probably actually a little bit better as a passer than given credit for. And going into this year, knowing that he's the guy, do think he takes that next step. I put him in this above average category. Next, we got Phil Jurkovec from Boston College. Listen, I'm going to put him in the average category, but I do think there is. I think he's certainly an interesting case. I don't know how much you can really judge him on last year. He suffered an injury early in the season. He admirably came back before he was probably ready. And he just wasn't able to be the same guy. I mean, Boston College last year was certainly a run-first team, even when he came back. But the reason I put him in the average category is even in 2020 when he was healthy, wasn't as effective as a passer as I might have thought if I didn't go back and look at the numbers. Was well under 8 yards per attempt, which is not great. And he completed just above 60% of his passes. So this was a guy going into last year. Right? Probably got a little bit too much hype. I don't know if you can knock him again just because he was hurt. It was an upper body injury too. So it directly affected his ability as a downfield thrower. At the end of the day, though, think he's average. Wouldn't be surprised if he takes that next step. But personally, just wasn't all that impressed by what I saw, even when he was healthy. I'll put Phil Jurkovec in the average category. Brennan Armstrong from Virginia. This is a guy that can really chuck the ball around. I'm putting him in the very good category. Listen, he's got a ton of wide receivers to work with again this year. I mean, this guy's a true gunslinger. Completed 65% of his passes, almost 9 yards per attempt, which is very good by my estimation. This guy's obviously a big part of what Virginia's doing. I'm interested to see with Tony Elliott now as head coach of Virginia. The knock on Virginia for a while now is, Armstrong last year threw for a ton of yards and all that, but the reason that they weren't very good overall, just couldn't really establish a run game. At the end of the day, I don't know if they have the Jimmies and Joes to be able to do that this year. I think Armstrong's going to have to carry the load once again. He's proven to be capable to do that, though. I really do think that. 10 interceptions is probably higher than you'd like for a very experienced guy like him. But at the end of the day, he's throwing the ball so much. I mean, you are going to make some mistakes. Definitely think the good outweighs the bad. Just in this offense, with all the playmakers he has back, I think Brennan Armstrong is going to have a very, very good year for the Virginia Cavaliers. Next up, we got Garret Schrader from Syracuse. Interesting cat here. I think you have to put him in the liability category just because he's not a good passer. He never has been. This is a guy that started his career at Mississippi State. Actually, Mike Leach tried to turn him into a wide receiver. He wasn't having any of that. So he ended up transferring to Syracuse. Didn't have a great year through the air last year. At the end of the day, though, this guy is a good runner. So I think there is kind of a caveat here. If Dino Babers just embraces that he doesn't have the guys to be able to have some, good passing offense. I mean, he's got one of the better running backs in the country in Sean Tucker. He had a great freshman year last year. He's got a guy in Schrader who can run. I mean, Schrader had almost 800 yards on the ground last year. Really good in that role. It's going to be interesting to see because, listen, there's a lot of pressure on Dino Babers this year. We'll get into that in future videos. But, at the end of the day, if Syracuse finds himself between a rock and a hard place, and you're asking Garret Schrader to go do something that he's not good at, I mean, if Dino Babers just says, throw the ball 9-10 times a game and run read option and keep the ball on the ground, I don't think Schrader's going to be a liability. I have a gut feeling that they are going to try to throw the ball more, and I don't think it's going to work out well. I think you got to put him in the liability category, especially as far as how he ranks some of these other guys. But I think as a pure runner, Schrader is very good in that role. Overall, liability, though. Malik Cunningham, Louisville. I don't know if you call this a hot take or not. I truly think that Malik Cunningham could be the best quarterback in the ACC this year. It's going to be his fourth year starting. He's shown strides already. His one knock in 2020 was his turnovers. He improved on that mightily last year. He almost ran for 1,000 yards on the ground last year, 9 yards per attempt through the air. So he's shown the ability to hit on some of those deep balls and move the ball vertically. Scott Satterfield's going to have to rely on him a lot this year. Basically Louisville is going to go as Malik Cunningham goes. But, to be honest with you, 4-year starter, I think he has what it takes to have a very good year. I think from an upside perspective, there might not be a more high upside guy than Malik Cunningham. I think he's underrated through the air, and then certainly what he can do with his feet. I'm putting him in this very good category. I'm not going to go on a limb and say, oh, he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. No, wouldn't be the most shocking thing ever, to be honest with you. But at the end of the day, I think his skill set's very good. He's experienced now. He's improved on the turnovers. He's shown the ability to hit on the deep balls as well as run the football. I think Malik Cunningham is a very, very good quarterback. Next, we got Jeff Sims, Georgia Tech. Oh, boy. I think Georgia Tech's problems go way beyond Jeff Sims. But at the end of the day, just relatively speaking, compared to some of these other guys, I think he probably is a liability. 20 interceptions in his first 2 years as a starter for Georgia Tech. He's going to have a tough time, I think, because Georgia Tech lost Jahmyr Gibbs, who's their best player, to Alabama in the transfer portal. That's not going to make Sims' life any easier. At the end of the day as well, this is a guy who, you can just see by this picture. He's long. He's got a good arm naturally, but, completed less than 60% of his passes. I mentioned the turnover struggles, and he just hasn't found that consistency down the field yet. I wouldn't be surprised if he does take that next step. He's going to need to. Jeff Collins needs something to go right. I wouldn't be surprised if he jumps up to one of these two categories. I think he's above average at best this year, but probably a safer play would be average. To be honest with you, I wasn't impressed overall by those passing numbers. Thought he was a little bit better than that, to be honest. He is another guy that can use his legs and will have to use his legs this year. Just with some of the inabilities that he's going to have around him. Georgia Tech is not well equipped right now. Like I said, we're going to get into overall team breakdowns coming up on future videos. But, Jeff Collins has the same problems in year 4 that he did in year 1. So that's not a good sign. That being said, I think you have to put Sims in the liability category. I think there is some that's where interpretation comes in, because to his team, he's certainly not a liability. But if you put him in a lot of these other programs, I just don't think he would stack up as well as some of these other guys. So I'm putting him in the liability. Do think there's some variance with him, though. Wouldn't be surprised if he jumps up a little bit after this year. Oh, boy. Time to ruffle some feathers. although it shouldn't. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei for Clemson, liability. I'm sorry. I mean, with the defense Clemson had last year, with all they had going for them, and listen, I know they went 10-3, so it wasn't a disastrous year, but I mean, they were clearly better than that, if not for some of their offensive woes. And I think the majority of that falls on Uiagalelei. 55% completion percentage, terrible. Less than 6 yards per attempt. I mean, he was virtually no threat down the field as a passer. Terrible. He threw more interceptions than he did touchdowns. Not good. I think it's surprising too, because we all remember in 2020, Trevor Lawrence went down for 2 weeks, and DJ Uiagalelei played well against Boston College. I know they ended up losing at Notre Dame, but he played admirably in that game. I don't think any of us were expecting that bad of a year last year. It's obvious that Dabo Swinney did not feel good about the quarterback depth last year, or else he wouldn't have continued to run DJ out there. Don't think that that's going to be the same story this year. He got a quarterback in Cade Klubnik. He is a true freshman, but at the end of the day, don't think Swinney and just Clemson's going to put up with another poor year from Uiagalelei. I've seen this story before. I'm a Texas fan. After Vince Young and Colt McCoy, dominated for that, 7-year stretch or whatever it was. In 2010, we had a guy named Gary Gilbert come in, 5-star, high expectations, threw up a clunker. We went 5-7. Going into that 2011 season, it was, he's going to bounce back. He'll be okay. He's going to grow from that. By week 2, he was benched. By week 3, he had transferred out of the program. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Uiagalelei, but from what he showed last year, I'm not high on him at all. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. He had 13 games to improve, and I just didn't see it. So I think DJ Uiagalelei, especially given the context of what's around him, he's a liability to Clemson right now. You might notice I have 2 logos right here. I'll go ahead and put those in the unknown. Duke, they got a quarterback battle right now between 2 young guys. Both have the ability as runners. But I'm putting them in the unknown. We didn't see enough from either one of those guys last year to be able to make a fair judgment on them. It's also a new system. Year 1 of Mike Elko, new offensive system in there with Kevin Johns. Don't think either one of those young quarterbacks at Duke have played enough to really make a fair judgment on them. I think there's a lot left to be judged before we can group those guys. I think North Carolina is somewhat the same. It's not from a coaching change or system perspective, but it's going to be Drake May versus Jacoby Criswell in this quarterback competition. May is the pocket passer. Criswell is the one that's more mobile. I'm going to say this about North Carolina, and I'm going to get into this as we start to break down teams, but I'm just going to say this right now. I mean, Sam Howell from a skill set standpoint, extremely good. Can throw the deep ball. He's accurate enough. He's very, very mobile. And they won 6 games last year. I mean, North Carolina's offensive line was one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in college football. If they can't protect Sam Howell, who's mobile, who's a good quarterback by all means, I mean, I have my worries about how either one of those guys, whether it's May or Criswell, is going to fare this year. With that being said, just haven't seen enough. I'll put them in the unknown. I have my doubts, though. As well as North Carolina has recruited, games are won and lost in the trenches, and they were horrible on the offensive line and pass block last year. Oh, this is going to be another controversial one right here. Kedon Slovis with Pittsburgh. Average quarterback. I'm sorry. He played in a system at USC that's obviously going to prop up quarterbacks. The air raid system, guys are always going to have a higher completion percentage. That is a quarterback system through and through. But I'll say this, Slovis's best year was 3 years ago. He's regressed each of the past 2 seasons. Ended up getting benched last year in favor of Jackson Dart, and wasn't too happy about that. But I think it was warranted. He's got like a 68% completion percentage at USC, but playing in that system, I mean, you should probably be above 70%. I mean, Will Rogers over at Mississippi State, he's at 75%. I'm not going to necessarily say that's impressive because I think that's all, Graham Harrell in that air raid scheme. Less than 8 yards per attempt. That's more what I look at. That's not very impressive. He struggled with turnovers at times at USC. I just saw serious regression from Slovis last year, and now you're going from a quarterback-friendly system to Pittsburgh. I know Pittsburgh was good last year. They lost their offensive coordinator. They lost their co-offensive coordinator to Texas, actually, who was a big part of that kind of that scheme change last year. They obviously lost Kenny Pickett, and they lost a weapon in Jordan Addison. This is going to be a different offense this year. And Cignetti Jr., their new offensive coordinator, he's much more of a pro-style run-first guy. A huge contrast from what Slovis ran at USC. I have my worries about how Keaton Slovis is going to fare this year. I think from a skill set standpoint too, like an NFL draft standpoint, guys talking about him as a first-round quarterback. I don't see that at all. I think he's overrated. I think he's propped up by the system he played in at USC, and he actually got worse in that system as he got older. So I think Slovis is an average quarterback. People who want to say Slovis is very good or Heisman, look at the numbers. You got to understand how air raid systems affect quarterbacks, and I just disagree. I think, some might say it's a hot take. I don't think so. Slovis is an average quarterback by my estimation. All right, definitely less controversial here. Virginia Tech, we got Grant Wells. Technically he's still in a quarterback battle, but by all indications, looks like he should win. I'll put him in this average category. Played at Marshall these last 2 years. He's got a big arm. He's got the talent. Struggle with turnovers though. That's a big thing with him. But did complete over 66% of his passes. This is obviously a step up in competition. I think he'll be serviceable. Wouldn't count out that he can move into this above average category, but probably going to need to see more from Wells to move him into one of those either above average or very good. But certainly, he'll probably be an upgrade from what they saw last year. Braxton Burmeister was just not good. Obviously, first year head coach, new system for him. Be interesting to see how he adjusts. I'll put him in the average category to be safe. If he can improve on turnovers, I could easily see him climbing into that above average category by the end of the season. Devin Leary, North Carolina State. Some people want to say he's a Heisman candidate. I don't want to go that far. I think right now I'd probably rate him as the best quarterback in the ACC. So I'll put him at top of that very good category. 35 touchdowns to 5 interceptions last year. That's very good. Very good completion percentage as well at 66%. I'll say the one thing, 8 yards per attempt is slightly low. I'd like to see him hit on some more deep balls, but at the end of the day, if your touchdown to interception ratio is 7-1, that's very good. So certainly got to tip your cap to Leary. The one thing I kind of worry about overall with North Carolina State, can they establish the run game? Because if they can get a run game going better than they have in years past, that's only going to help him make defenses respect the run, and he'll be able to hit on more of those deep balls and be able to uptick that yards per attempt. I think Devin Leary's got an extremely high floor. I think he's talented as well. I think right now going into the season, I'd probably rate him as my number one quarterback in the ACC. Safe to say he's going to have a good year. I think a guy like Malik Cunningham has the ability to overtake him. But just overall, he's got some playmakers on the outside, does Leary. So he should have a very similar year to last year, maybe even better. If he can, if he can get like 9 yards per attempt and climb closer to 70% while still taking care of the football, he'll be in that Heisman conversation. I don't want to put him there yet, just because personally, I don't see it, and I'm not going to project that. But Devin Leary is a very, very good quarterback. All right, 2 more guys left. Tyler Van Dyke, he's gotten a lot of hype this offseason. I'd say rightfully so. He only played about half the year last year. If you'll remember, De'Aaron King came back for Miami. That didn't really work out. Tyler Van Dyke stepped up. It looked like Miami was going to be in serious trouble. I know they didn't have a great year, but they would have had a much worse year if not for the emergence of Tyler Van Dyke. In just half a season, 25 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He's at that 9 yards per attempt. Completion percentage is, I guess, a little bit low. It's just above 60%. But I think he'll probably improve on that. I'm going to put him in the very good category. I do think he's behind Leary. And I'd put him behind Cunningham too. I think he's just above Brennan Armstrong. I guess the one question I have with him, it's obviously a first-year head coach in Mario Cristobal, new offensive coordinator in Josh Gaddis. How does that affect things? I think that's somewhat of an unknown. But that being said, Van Dyke stepped up in some big spots last year for the Hurricanes, and it certainly earned my respect for that. To come in immediately and be able to take care of the football, and then also, be able to be effective downfield. 9 yards per attempt, that's nothing to sniff at. I think Tyler Van Dyke's a very good quarterback. I think some of that hype is real. Don't think he's a true Heisman candidate, but I think he's a very, very good quarterback. One of the best quarterbacks in this conference. All right, we're going to round it out with Sam Hartman from Wake Forest. I got to be honest, I was a little bit I don't want to say I was underwhelmed by Sam Hartman's numbers, but to see a guy that experienced complete less than 60% of his passes. That was a little bit surprising. Wake Forest had a pretty easy schedule the first half of last season, but down the stretch of the year, as they started to play some tougher games, Hartman's play really started to decline. I'm going to put him in the above average category. I think he's just above Jordan, or, I don't want to say just above. I think he's better than Jordan Travis, especially as a passer. Certainly got to get above 60%, probably closer to 65. 59% completion for a guy that experienced, that's got so much experience around him. That's not very good. So I think that's what keeps him out of that very good category. I think Sam Hartman last year just kind of personified Wake Forest, under Dave Clawson. They always get off to a hot start, but they've really finished seasons poorly under Dave Clawson. It'll be interesting to see if they can finish the job this year. I'd also like to see him take care of the football a little bit better in some of those bigger games. He certainly got the ability, just, with the makeup of that Wake Forest team, they could certainly have a very good year. I could see him climbing into the second tier, but I'm going to put him atop of that third tier right now. I've got to see more efficiency from him. I've got to see him step up in big games. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you for tuning in. If you got this far, obviously there's some nuance, to these tier lists based off past numbers. Some of it's my opinion, and some of it's just how they fit within the context of their team and what they're being asked to do. Like I said, I'm going to have these for every Power 5 conference rolling out here over the next week or so. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And also follow me on Twitter here at Fordham Betting. We're obviously deep in the boondoggles of baseball season right now. I'm actually in the green overall in baseball season. So obviously, these tier lists aren't necessarily sports betting related. That's certainly going to be where most of my content is, centered at throughout the college football season as well. But, like I said, we're still a month and a half out. Thought this was a good way to get things rolling here on the YouTube. Just as a reminder, in college football last year, hit at a 55% clip and netted 27 units. I feel even better about how I'm going to do this year. So follow me on this channel, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Fordham Betting, and I'll be back soon. We're going to go with the Big Ten next. So it'll go ACC today, obviously, and then we're going to go Big Ten, Big 12, Pac-12, and then we'll round it out with the ACC. So thank you all for tuning in, and yeah.